As with many other things done during the Obama presidency in the US, the federal government is looking to undo the Title II classification of the internet, which is currently how it is legally ensured that the internet is kept a level playing field. I discussed what net neutrality was in my video on Verizon and Tumblr, so I'll just provide that again for anyone who may not have watched. For anyone who might be unaware, net neutrality refers to the rules requiring ISPs, or internet service providers, to treat all traffic equally in general. This is similar to how our phone companies can't legally make a connection clearer or less reliable depending on if they approve of who is talking to each other, or because the call requires connecting their customers to a competitor's customers. It is also sometimes compared to how an electric company can't create a signal to detect which device you're plugging in and refuse power to ones it dislikes. These limits mean that, as long as the other links in the chain can actually handle the traffic, which sometimes they can't, so this doesn't always happen, and your device doesn't have some software set up to filter some content, any site or service you request will run at the same speed and with the same limitations as any other. The reclassification to Title II occurred back in 2015 in the last battle for the net. As a refresher, this happened because various ISPs were wanting to charge some companies like Netflix directly. The public reasoning behind it was basically that a lot of the traffic and data that the ISPs had to deal with was coming from these services. That basically ignored the fact that their customers were already paying for that. There are plenty of videos and articles around if you want more information. There are also plenty of gimmicky clips to help draw attention to the issue for the masses, who may not spend as much time worrying about the internet or researching these issues. For example, so far, at least, I believe I can trust my audience to look into these things for themselves if they want more information. I also trust you don't need ominous disruptive warnings to pay attention or care about a problem. So instead of detailing the entire history or creating a short clip to share around and try to frighten your friends and followers into action, I want to actually address some of the arguments against government-mandated net neutrality. Sorry if this gets a bit long. I will also be updating social media to remind everyone to make their voices heard. If you want those reminders, be sure to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, or Minds. So without further ado, here are the arguments I can find opposing net neutrality or Title II classification, and why I don't think they hold up. Argument 1. Title II is a Depression-era rule intended to regulate trains or the AT&T/Bell monopoly. The problem with this is that a rule being old doesn't mean it isn't valid or that it won't work for our current purposes. We rely on much older rules to protect vital freedoms every day despite all the changes to the world since they were written. Title II is actually a classification of something as a common carrier or a public utility. It was created to regulate something going across state lines, which the internet most certainly does, and in the case of the phone companies, a monopoly, which many ISPs essentially are in a given area. It has also been updated since its initial creation. Argument 2. It actually stifles small businesses and startups. This argument might actually be plausible when it comes to smaller startup ISPs. It's been in effect since 2015, however, and I can't seem to find anything showing this impact. Additionally, many if not most areas in the US essentially have a situation where there's an effective monopoly for high-speed access, and startups are already often unable to get off the ground. These rules protect consumers from what is essentially a monopoly in the area, using their position and power to control what their customers can see or do. The only way I could see this actually being a valid argument is that, without that protection, small companies might be able to find enough of a market to start up despite all the disadvantages and lower quality service they'd be providing. Do we really want to create that situation just to encourage a few startups, though? Argument number 3. These rules are countering a non-existent problem. No company has throttled or restricted certain sites that couldn't pay them. This is kind of just nonsense. The reclassification actually occurred in response to plans to provide faster access to specific services that would pay the ISPs. It also counters anti-competitive practices that have been tried, such as providing unlimited streaming through certain services while limiting access to all others on mobile data plans. On top of these things, Comcast has actually been caught throttling BitTorrent. For the record, BitTorrent and other peer-to-peer services are actually legal, and in fact they're sometimes even a preferred method for open source and copylefted projects. The common thought of them equaling piracy stems from how they are used, not a fundamental part of the tools themselves. Argument number 4. The rules don't require Title II, or the internet worked just fine before the Title II classification. For this we need a little bit of history. Initially, the internet was run through phone lines and dial-up modems. For a while after that, even broadband was frequently DSL, which still used phone lines. Since phone lines have long been classified under Title II, there was already some degree of protection in these instances. It also had a much smaller market with smaller and less politically involved providers. This also allowed for more competition. Since the providers didn't have to set up infrastructure, more could start up or offer services in more locations without spending as much initially. As time went on, we reached a point where some ISPs wanted to act in ways other than behaving as simple neutral service providers. When the FCC tried to step in and stop or prevent these actions, it wound up going to court. The reclassification occurred as a direct result to the Verizon Communications Inc. versus FCC case. This made Title II necessary for the FCC to be able to regulate effectively enough to protect net neutrality. Argument number 5. Charging everyone the same wouldn't be fair. Nothing about net neutrality or Title II fundamentally requires that everyone is charged the same amount. ISPs have been regulated under it since 2015, and there are still tiers and data caps. The difference is that, under the current rules, the consumer picks what they will pay for based on what they expect to use, and gets access to what they request at a speed or limit based on their choices. Otherwise, it might be based on the ISP's choices. Argument number 6. Nothing in Title II requires treating everyone the same. This basically just misunderstands what's going on. It's not really that Title II necessarily solves all the problems, as it is that Title II is necessary for the FCC to be able to regulate effectively at all. Argument number 7. Censorship and other various fears about how the FCC will regulate the internet. Title II does necessarily give them the power to regulate some things on the internet, and it's understandable why that could be concerning. That said, they've had this power when it comes to other services like phones for decades, and people are still free to say what they want on the phone. The same could be said of the internet since 2015. While vigilance is a good idea, and any attempts by the government to censor the internet as a whole should certainly be countered, the hypothetical possibility alone isn't a reason to leave people at the whims of providers who have shown they want to misuse that control. Argument number 8. Internet taxes could happen. I haven't seen any evidence of them so far, but it is a possibility. The question then becomes which is more important, keeping it tax-free, which, by the way, doesn't actually mean the prices stay lower, just that there's no money going to the government from it, or ensuring an equal playing field. Also, again, this reclassification only occurred because it was the only way to protect net neutrality at the time. Those are the main arguments I can find that don't appear to be jokes. This is also not really a partisan issue. It's not that the left is on one side with the right on the other, despite how it may appear. Some of the big names in the fight for net neutrality you may already be familiar with from YouTubers. These include things like Twitter, Kickstarter, Reddit, Minds, and Patreon. Other names include Mozilla, the makers of Firefox, Adblock, BitTorrent, Amazon, Creative Commons, DeviantArt, Etsy, Discord, Public Knowledge, and SoundCloud. That's not even getting into the porn sites, activist sites, and open source resources like GitHub. This is even with a list that seems far smaller than last time, and so far excludes big names like Wikipedia, Google, and Tumblr. I'll include a link to Battle for the Net's site on this issue. From there, you should be able to easily send a letter making your voice heard. While the site is obviously for net neutrality, there's nothing stopping someone from replacing the form letter with one opposing if they wish. There are also resources available if you have a website, channel, or even social media and want to get involved. Thanks for hearing me out, and as always, civil discussion, suggestions, and constructive criticism are welcome in the comments or via social media. Feel free to rate, comment, and share. If you want to hear more from me, subscribe and click the bell for notifications. Stick around through the credits for a link to another video, or check out the description for any sources that I used.